Most people believe saving cash makes them financially safer. But during certain economic periods, holding large amounts of cash quietly makes you poorer. And the most surprising part is your bank balance might never change while your real wealth shrinks. Let me tell you a simple story about two friends, because this story shows exactly how inflation turns safe cash into a silent wealth destroyer. And once you see it, you'll understand why experienced investors treat cash very differently from how most beginners do. In early 2021, Mark and Alex were in almost identical situations. Both had about $100,000 saved, earned similar incomes, lived in the same mid-sized city, and both prided themselves on being responsible with money. But 5 years later, their outcomes looked completely different. One protected his dollars while the other repositioned them, and that single mindset shift explains something most savers completely miss. Mark believed in playing it safe. He worked hard, saved consistently, avoided stock market swings, and real estate risks. So his $100,000 stayed in a high-yield savings account, earning maybe 1% in 2021. Then 3 to 4% later, as rates rose, from his perspective this felt responsible. His balance stayed stable. It even grew slightly with interest, but Alex had the same discipline when saving. Yet he viewed cash very differently. He didn't see cash as the final resting place for wealth. He saw it as temporary fuel waiting to be deployed into assets that could grow and protect against the economy's natural direction. And this difference in perspective becomes very important because starting around 2021, something subtle but powerful began happening in the financial system. Something most savers never noticed until it was too late. Now here's where things get interesting. Because in 2021 and the years that followed, the financial system was changing in a very specific way. Governments were injecting massive stimulus. Central banks expanded the money supply dramatically. Interest rates stayed historically low for longer than expected, which meant the amount of currency circulating grew much faster than normal. And when currency supply expands rapidly, something else quietly follows. Prices across the economy adjust upward. But the mechanics are easier to see with a simple visual most beginners overlook. Imagine that bathtub filled with water. The water represents every dollar circulating in the economy. Now take one cup out. That cup is your $100,000 savings, safe and sound in the bank, but then the faucet opens wider, stimulus checks go out, banks lend more freely, central banks add liquidity, the tub fills faster and faster. Your cup stays exactly the same size. It doesn't grow, but as the tub gets fuller, your cup becomes a smaller percentage of the whole system. That's inflation in action, not random price jumps, but currency slowly losing purchasing power. And from 2021 through 2025, we saw clear examples. Housing prices rose sharply, construction materials climbed, food costs increased, insurance premiums went up. Mark's account still showed roughly $105,000 or so after interest, but that money bought noticeably less house, less groceries, less everyday security. The loss happened quietly, year after year. But here's the part most people miss entirely. The real loss wasn't just inflation eating purchasing power. Mark also lost positioning, because while he preserved dollars, Alex repositioned those dollars into something that actually benefits from the same forces destroying cash, and that one decision flipped how inflation affected him. So let's look at what Alex actually did. In 2021, Alex took his $100,000 and used it as a down payment on a small 8-unit apartment building in a stable suburban area. Nothing flashy or speculative, just a basic property with solid tenants paying rent every month. Let's draw this out simply. Picture 3 boxes stacked vertically. Top box labeled rental income, middle box the property itself, bottom box the mortgage. Each month, tenants pour rent into the top box. That money flows downward, first covering operating expenses like maintenance, property management, insurance, taxes, utilities, then covering the fixed mortgage payment. Anything left becomes cash flow to Alex. Now here's the key structural advantage cash can never match. When inflation rises, rents often rise too because tenants' incomes and replacement costs increase. But Alex's mortgage payment stays fixed for 30 years. So over time, income gradually climbs while debt remains constant. And because commercial properties are valued primarily on the net income they produce, the building's value tends to rise as that net income grows. So now we know two important things. First, cash sitting still loses purchasing power as the money supply expands. Second, income-producing assets like that apartment building can adjust upward because rents rise while debt stays locked, which means inflation that hurts cash holders can actually help asset owners. But let's make this even clearer with a real commercial example. Consider the small retail center Alex bought next using the cash flow he had already earned from the apartment building. He used $60,000 in accumulated profits as the down payment on a $450,000 neighborhood strip with 5 tenant spaces, a coffee shop, dry cleaner, nail salon, cell phone repair, and a small gym. Each month, the tenants paid a combined $10,000 in rent. After operating expenses of $3,500 and the fixed mortgage payment of $3,000, Alex kept $3,500 in positive cash flow every single month. That rent came in reliably, paid the entire mortgage, and put real extra money in his pocket month after month. When inflation spiked, tenant sales rose with higher prices, so Alex renegotiated leases upward by 25% total over the next 3 years. This lifted net operating income significantly. And because commercial properties are valued based on the income they produce, not just nearby sales, the building's value rose from $450,000 to $625,000, which means Alex now had over $175,000 in equity from the retail center alone, plus the growing cash flow that kept adding real money to his life every month. And with those profits, Alex managed to set aside the first payment for an additional retail property, while Mark kept saving his money in the bank, earning only small interest that could never keep pace. Fast forward 5 years and the difference was unmistakable. Mark's bank account showed roughly $110,000 after interest, but inflation had quietly cut its real purchasing power by 25%, so it bought far less house, less groceries, and less freedom than in 2021. Alex now owned both the apartment building and the retail center. His combined monthly cash flow exceeded $5,000, covering every mortgage and still leaving substantial extra income. The properties had built more than $300,000 in total equity through rent growth, amortization, and income-driven appreciation. Alex had real money working for him every month, options to expand, refinance, or simply enjoy the system, while Mark was still waiting for his savings to grow. Now, this doesn't mean you should eliminate cash completely. Liquidity still matters for emergencies, unexpected repairs, or new opportunities. So most experienced commercial investors keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash or safe equivalents. But holding large amounts idle for years during inflationary periods creates silent erosion. Because if inflation averages 4 to 5%, your savings lose thousands in real value annually, and you miss the income and equity that productive assets can build. And this leads to one of the most important ideas in long-term investing. The goal isn't simply to save money. The goal is to own assets that generate money because systems compound, cash erodes. At the beginning, most people see dollars as safety. Professional investors see income streams as real security. And once you start thinking that way, commercial real estate becomes something very different, not risky speculation, but a practical way to turn temporary cash into lasting wealth. If this story helped you rethink how cash works in the real world, hit that like button. And if you want more calm breakdowns on commercial real estate investing, rental portfolio building, how to analyze net operating income, or using debt strategically in inflationary times, subscribe to David Real Estate. Because on this channel, we don't chase hype, we build systems, and remember, cash is temporary, productive assets are what generate it.